Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. ABC, 1, 2, 3. That's how I've got no rhythm. And today I'm going to do the first of my accidental authors videos, where I'm going through my library and picking out accidental authors. I'm defining accidental authors. I've made an intro video, which I'll link to below, defining accidental authors as an author of whom I have read at least 3 books, and all the books that I've read by this author cannot be part of the same series. So if I'm just reading, like, for example, Ed McBain is the example where I've read so far 42 of his novels in the 87th Precinct series. And as it's an ongoing series, as a whole project, that's nothing accidental about that. I started at the beginning thinking I'm going to make my way to the end. So those are the 2 rules. And the first one I'm going to look at, starting with the A's over there, is Peter Ackroyd. And I have here 5 books by Peter Ackroyd, 4 novels, 1 work of nonfiction. Ackroyd probably better known today as a historian, writer of nonfiction. He's a very prolific writer, born in 1949, and very much focused on London. A lot of work set in and around London, and the psychogeography of London is a key recurring theme. But he's also a biographer, biographies of T.S. Eliot and other Dickens. Sort of very prolific polymath mind and a terrific writer. And I've got 5 books here that I will take you through, and it's actually a good place to start because Ackroyd goes back to the very start of my real reading career with a book called Hawksmore, which I think is his second novel maybe. He'd written some poetry at that point and maybe some nonfiction. And this is dated inside. You'll see it's got my title name there. April 1986, so 37 years ago. I'm still in high school. I'm 17 years old, not yet 17, 16 years old. And this hardback book, which cost £8.95 new, would have been bought for me. My mother must have bought this and presented it to me, probably because we got a recommendation from somewhere. I was already studying the last 2 years of high school, so I would have been studying literature, and someone somewhere must have recommended this. Either I bought the recommendation to her and she went and bought it, or it came up somewhere. Maybe she heard about it on Women's Hour and decided that this would be a good read for me. Anyway, the book is purchased, brought to me, and 220 pages is, now that's a delight to read a 220-page novel. Back then, any kind of reading that wasn't for school would have been quite a struggle for me. But I remember reading this and it opening up my world to what novels could be. So Hawksmore, there's a real character in history called Nicholas Hawksmore, who was an architect in the early 18th century, responsible for many of the churches around London. In the story, we have a character called Nicholas Dyer, who was an architect at the start of the 18th century. So Nicholas Dyer based on Hawksmore, and we have a modern day character, a detective in the 20th century, this was not 21st century yet, who is investigating a series of murders, and a detective called Nicholas Hawksmore. So, a certain blurring of fiction and reality we're seeing already. And back in that early part, Nicholas Dyer is building churches, and it's part about the influence that the church had on the whole of society. And there is also a theme here of human sacrifices, of bodies being used, the blood of children, the bodies of children being used and buried in the foundations of a church. There was an idea this would give a firm foundation. Twisted. This is nothing official or church policy over, but that's the story that's going on in Nicholas Hawksmore. The character Nicholas Hawksmore in the modern day is investigating this, and then, if I remember, there's some. When you look at the map, there is, and the lines of the churches are connected. I think it forms a pentagram, or it's a very weird, twisted, sort of dark, gothic sensibility. But I love this. Some of it went over my head, but just in terms of a short, accessible novel that had a lot going on, this was a great introduction to me for Peter Ackroyd. Jump forward a couple of years, I have now Chasten, which is his next novel work of fiction after Hawksmore, and that is Thomas Chasten, who was a real character in history. This is a painting called The Death of Thomas Chasten. He was a poet, by all accounts, a beautiful young man who died tragically young, and this again mixes that fact with fiction. There are some questions as to whether Thomas Chasten, the poet, who was never super successful in his own right, whether he was actually responsible for writing work that we know of in other poets' names. So this is a story about literary plagiarism and history, and with a murder at the heart of it. Again, I think there's something where this is being looked at from modern times. I don't remember, but it calls it both tragic and profoundly comic, a meditation on human destiny and a satire on human folly, which is as good a blurb as you'll get. There's the young Peter Ackroyd, back in the, this is from 1988. And this book, my mother posted to me when I'm in Israel. So I finish high school, I come to Israel, spent a year in kibbutz with a bunch of friends, and spent a second year in a religious seminary, just sort of learning and studying before I came back to London to study literature at university. My mum, I think, stuck this in an envelope and mailed it to me in Israel. I remember tearing open the brown paper packaging and, oh look, it's a hardback novel that my mum sent me. But I think I enjoyed Chasten even more than Hawksmore. It was a bloody good read, and again, sort of eye-opening in terms of what literature can do. And also about 200 to 30 pages, which is a nice bite size for a novel. Then I come back to London. I started studying literature, and I must have asked my mother to buy me the new Peter Ackroyd, because, and this is the very definition of an accidental read, so I had two good experiences. Another novel comes out, and this is hardback, like £12.95 in hardback. No way I bought this myself. £9.89. I'm a first year student, but this is me deciding, okay, I'm going to read Peter Ackroyd. He's somebody who I read. I've read 2 books by him. I'm going to read a third. I don't remember a single thing about First Light. I feel like it didn't go. It wasn't based. It wasn't a historical novel in the way that Hawksmore and Chasten could be described as. But beyond that, I don't remember anything about it, except I've got this big hardback, and I definitely read it. So that was 3 books by Peter Ackroyd, kind of, done, got the point, and I can move on to other authors. I come to live in Israel, where my choice is now limited. There's when I'm buying books, this is pre-internet, pre-international delivery, pre-having a friend who's a pilot who can fly out books to me. And so my choice of what I'm going to read is limited to what I can find in local secondhand bookshops. So I must have been out of something to read. I walk in a book and I recognize the author and pick up another novel by Peter Ackroyd. And this is Dan Leno and the Lionhearts Golem. Dan Leno, also a real character, musical comedian from Victorian era, and Lionhearts Golem is a story about a monster murderer in the Limehouse part of London. The Golem is a character from Jewish history. The Golem of Prague was a creature created by a rabbi in Prague to protect the Jews, a creature carved out of clay. And so this was quite a fun romp, where I might not have read more Ackroyd, but because I was in a shop, I had limited choices. Ackroyd was a name I recommended. I remembered. I'd had some good experiences with him, so I read a 4th novel by Peter Ackroyd, and then ended up reading one of his non-fiction books, because this just sounded super interesting when this came out. This was a big non-fiction release, was widely reviewed, and I'd had some good experience with Peter Ackroyd. I knew that he was obsessed with London, and so I picked up London, the biography, which is unusual. It's a biography of a city, and starting with Caesar in 55 BC, going all the way up to the 2000 mayoral elections, and written as a biography in the same way that you would be familiar with a biography of a human being, but taking the city and looking at it in different times, what the city looked like, how it grew. There's some great pictures. You can see there each of those there, and then there's 4 sets of pictures of London throughout history, starting with some very sort of early stuff and taking us all the way up to sort of more modern day 20th century images. So great, really enjoyed this. And that's kind of it with me and Peter Ackroyd. 5 books, 4 fiction, 1 work of non-fiction, significant one. I think that at some point they republished this in separate chunks. This is like 700 pages all in one, which this was £12.99 for it, which was a lot for a paperback back then. And I read this in 2002, and I haven't read Peter Ackroyd since. So that's why he's the first of my hashtag accidental authors. I would love to know if you've read any Ackroyd, if you read any of these or any other Peter Ackroyd that you think is essential. And I'd really love for if anyone wants to do a video of their hashtag accidental author and give examples of books that authors they've come back to without necessarily planning to, but because that's what happens, and that's how we acquire and read books. And thank you very much. I hope that was fun. Bye.